coming up on The World Today. Tigray rebels vow to drive out enemies after capturing capital Mekelle. Ex-President Jacob Zuma sentenced to 15 months in jail by South Africa's top court. Plus, progress on mutual interests in spotlight as Israel Foreign Minister visits United Arab Emirates. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Akaite Afia. We began the program today with Ethiopia's Tigray crisis, where regional forces battling government troops in the region have pledged to drive out what they call enemies, suggesting fighting will continue despite a unilateral ceasefire declaration by the federal administration in Addis Ababa. Earlier, the Tigrayan forces said the regional capital, Mekelle, was 100% back under their control, following the retreat of the Ethiopian government forces the day before, adding that they were conducting mop-up operations. The retreat follows days of territorial gains by the Tigrayan forces battling Ethiopia's government and its allies, including troops from neighboring Eritrea and fighters from the Ethiopian region of Amhara, which borders Tigray to the south. The swift turn in the nearly 8-month war has left people scrambling to understand what exactly is going on in the region of 6 million, as communications links are largely down. Meanwhile, UN humanitarians have expressed concern at the uncertain situation in Ethiopia's conflict-ravaged Tigray region, despite a ceasefire call from the government highlighting the ongoing famine-like conditions there and the potential disease for outbreaks. Earlier this month, the UN Children's Fund, UNICEF, warned that 140,000 children are acutely malnourished and at risk of dying unless aid is forthcoming.
This is making it even more difficult for our staff to work and deliver humanitarian assistance. We call for calm and restraint and appeal to all parties to the conflict to abide by international law, to protect civilians, including people who have been displaced, and to ensure that humanitarian workers can continue to exercise their duties and reach as many people as they can, which are in need of vital assistance right now.
From our side at WHO, we are taking measures to strengthen the security and well-being of our staff, but at the same time, we are continuing to deliver activities where it is possible to do so. And these includes activities in IDP camps around surveillance and access to essential health care, and increasing the number of mobile health clinics. With hospitals that are barely functioning, people being displaced, and the looming famine, the risk of communicable and vaccine-preventable diseases spreading due to the lack of food, clean water, safe shelter, and access to healthcare is very real. And all these factors combined are literally a recipe for larger epidemics.
Over in South Africa, former President Jacob Zuma has been sentenced to 15 months by the highest court in the country. The jail sentence comes after the Constitutional Court found him guilty of contempt for defying its order to appear at an inquiry into corruption while he was president. Mr. Zuma's time in power, which ended in 2018, was dogged by graft allegations. Businessmen were accused of conspiring with politicians to influence the decision-making process. Let's take a listen to the court ruling read out by Constitutional Court Judge Sisi Kampepe.
In the final analysis, the Constitutional Court makes the following order. 1, the application for direct access is granted. 2, the Helen Suzman Foundation is admitted as amicus curiae. 3, it is declared that Mr. Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma is guilty of the crime of contempt of court for failure to comply with the order made by this court in Secretary of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption and fraud in the public sector, including organs of state, versus Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma. Mr. Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma is sentenced to undergo 15 months imprisonment. 5, Mr. Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma is ordered to submit himself to the South African Police at Nkandla Police Station or Johannesburg Central Police Station within 5 calendar days from the date of this order.
In Johannesburg, residents are split over the 15-month jail sentence for former leader Zuma. Some say he deserves more punishment, while others say the sentence is unfair.
President Zuma going to jail, I think for me, it's not a good thing. I totally disagree with that. We have people here, even us as youth, we've seen what President Zuma has done during his term of office. So this is so unfair. President Zuma has been nothing but the best to us as the youth, and he has been fighting for the black South Africans, which are poorly and marginalized. So I totally disagree with this.
Because it deserve more like a country, you understand? So I feel because it's a holiday, it's like a holiday because
so in my point of view, I think it's justice taking its course. Vele it has been long coming ukuthi kwenzeke lo ukuthi uZuma igcine engenile ngasejele.
Given the fact that the crimes that he committed, fraud, defrauding the country, it goes to it's a generational thing. I mean, you have stolen from the poorest of the poorest, and obviously those poor people take care of the upcoming generation that have to fight the struggle of breaking the curse of poverty and the likes. So yeah, the sentence itself does not justify.
Earlier, my colleague Layo Adegoke spoke to legal practitioner Idemudia Uriesi on the legal implications of this ruling on the country's judicial system. He says the legal system has bent over backward repeatedly to accommodate Zuma, so the sentence doesn't come as a surprise.
Implications at all. From a legal perspective, you must realize there are two issues here. The one is the Commission of Inquiry, which has been found in contempt of. The other is this corruption trial that dates back to, perhaps it could even be, I think, 2000. So it's if he's incarcerated, he will simply be taken by prison authorities to attend his trial every day and brought back. So from a purely legal, procedural, and even a substantive perspective, there are no implications at all. I think it's a reaffirmation of the rule of law. You must remember that the Commission of Inquiry has tried for over 2 years to get Mr. Zuma to come and give evidence of what he knows. He has had a plethora of reasons why he shouldn't go. He went once and, he bandied around accusations, scurrilous accusations, baseless. And then he wouldn't go back, and he had COVID as an excuse. He had going overseas for treatment. He had all kinds of excuses. In any event, I think the chairman of the commission eventually issued a subpoena, which he also defied. And based on that, an application was brought to the Concord. So the legal system has bent over backwards to actually accommodate Mr. Zuma. And I think any onlooker anyone who had even half-heartedly followed proceedings would have seen that he had this coming long ago. So it's not a surprise at all.
Well, away from the African continent to the Middle East, Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid today inaugurated the country's embassy in the United Arab Emirates and offered an olive branch to other former adversaries with a promise of Israeli diplomatic presence. Mr. Lapid has been on a 2-day visit to the UAE, a trip that provided opportunity for the new Israeli government to make diplomatic inroads.
Israel wants peace with its neighbors, with all its neighbors. We aren't going anywhere. The Middle East is our home, and we are here to stay. So we call on all the countries of the region to recognize that and to come to talk to us.
The UN human rights investigator on Iran has called for an independent inquiry into allegations of state-ordered executions of thousands of political prisoners in 1988 and the role played by the president-elect Ibrahim Raisi as Tehran deputy prosecutor. Javed Rahman says that over the years, his office had gathered testimonies and evidence and is ready to share them if the United Nations Human Rights Council or other bodies sets up an impartial investigation. However, he voices deep concern at reports that some of the mass graves are being destroyed as part of a continuing cover-up.
I think it is time, and it's very important now that Mr. Raisi is the president, that we start investigating what happened in 1988 and the role of individuals. They have to allow that inquiry and that kind of investigation to take place in a transparent way. Otherwise, we will have very serious concerns about this president and the role, or the purported role, that he has played in historically in those executions. I think you asked about the evidence, mass graves. Again, we have made communications to the Islamic Republic of Iran because we have concerns that there is again a policy to actually destroy, or there may be some activity to destroy evidence of mass graves.
The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is calling on the Security Council and all countries to strongly support the protection of children in all ways at all times. He made this known while presenting his report on children and armed conflict. He says during 2020, almost 24,000 grave violations were committed against 19,300 children in the 21 situations covered by the report's mandate.
I call on the Security Council and all member states to strongly support the protection of children in all ways at all times. There is no place for children in conflict, and we must not allow conflict to trample on the rights of children.
For the children living through the 21 conflicts outlined in the report, the challenges of daily life under COVID-19 are magnified. School closures, increased risks of violence and abuse under lockdowns, mental health impacts, and being separated from their friends and peers. Negative coping mechanisms like child marriage and child labor, all against the backdrop of protracted conflicts and global socioeconomic crises that threatens to roll back decades of progress and increase the risk of recruitment and use of children.
Still to come on The World Today. Dubai residents take the plunge with ice bath therapy. We'll tell you all about it in a moment. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. We continue to monitor the coronavirus pandemic in countries around the world and are finding out authorities in Russia are promising to prosecute people issuing fake passes to Moscow bars and restaurants that are only allowing in vaccinated and COVID-free customers. In Scotland, there are warnings about how cancer treatment has been impacted by the pandemic. And the Delta variant is to make up the majority of COVID cases in Portugal. There's more in the Global Update.
The Red Cross has described the COVID-19 surge in Indonesia as being on the edge of a catastrophe as the Delta variant dominates transmission and hospitals reach capacity. Indonesia is counting on mass vaccinations to get on top of the virus, but just 13.3 million of the 181.5 million targeted for inoculation have received the required 2 doses. After recording its highest number of daily coronavirus deaths, Russia has announced that the country will fail to vaccinate 60% of its population by autumn as planned. The Kremlin has blamed the recent surge in COVID-19 cases on the infectious Delta variant, which they say accounts for around 90% of all new cases, and on the reluctance of many Russians to get vaccinated. Over in Britain, another 22,868 coronavirus cases have been reported in the last 24 hours, the highest since January the 30th this year. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson had confirmed on Monday that there will be no early easing of the remaining coronavirus restrictions before the planned date of July the 19th. And finally, in France, the Delta variant, first found in India, now represents nearly 20% of COVID-19 cases in the country. This is up from last week's estimate of it representing 9 to 10% of cases, but only 500 new confirmed cases were reported on Monday, while the 7-day moving average of daily additional infections fell to an almost 10-month low.
Former refugee Jonas Kinde is now showing refugees how they can thrive in their new homes when given opportunities in sports, education, and health. He is a track and field athlete originally from Ethiopia, but is now living and studying in Luxembourg. Jonas also works as a pharmacy and manages stockpiles of COVID-19 vaccines.
Jonas Kinde may not be training for this year's Tokyo 2020 Summer Olympic Games, but the 41-year-old once ran the marathon in 2 hours 17 minutes and has no intention of slowing down. The former Ethiopian refugee was selected by the International Olympic Committee to compete for the refugee Olympic team at the 2016 Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
Running refreshes the mind because when you run, and you have a fresh mind again, because when we have a lot of problems, when we run, it is getting better, because running helps us, as I said, physically and mentally, to find ourselves and to build our morale and physique.
Kinde is doing more than promoting fitness and mental health now. In the country and region he has called home since 2012. He has a job that not only provides an income, but a direct way to help in the fight against pandemic as well.
I'm working in the pharmacy, so the pharmacy we distribute the medicines for the patients, for the COVID patients, that I'm really happy actually that I work for this domain, because I can help the people who is positive with the COVID. So we distribute the vaccine staffs, the medicine and medical materials.
Kinde is also studying and regularly makes time to meet up with friends. He urges other refugees to take advantage of the opportunities around them and appeals for acceptance and support from host countries and communities.
My message for the refugees is stay strong and fight for peace, and stay moving, be active, help each other. For the people around the world, my message is we have to stand with refugees, because to be a refugee, it is not a choice. At any time, everyone can become a refugee. So we have to show the solidarity together.
The UN Refugee Agency says Kinde and many other former refugees are shining examples for those who are still struggling to settle down after fleeing their countries.
Temperatures are rising in northwestern United States and Canada with a heat wave mirrored across the northern hemisphere from Eastern Europe to India. It has been described better as a pressure cooker heat wave, which has broken records twice in 2 days, showing no signs of abating. A spokesperson for the World Meteorological Organization warns that the extreme temperatures pose a major threat to people's health, agriculture, and the environment.
Exceptional and dangerous heat wave is baking northwestern United States of America and western Canada. This is obviously a part of the world which is more accustomed to cool weather. Temperatures are likely to reach as high as around 45 degrees Celsius by day for perhaps 5 or more days. So that's, very long spell, and with extremely warm nights in between. Canadian record was broken on Sunday, with Lytton in the province of British Columbia recording 46.6 degrees Celsius. This smashed the previous record. Normally when you break a record, it's by a small margin. This smashed the previous record by a full 1.6 degrees Celsius.
We talked about the rising temperatures in the United States. Now the cities of Portland and Salem in Oregon and Seattle in Washington did set new records on Monday as the Pacific Northwest baked under a heat wave that shut down much of daily life for residents. Temperatures rose as high as 47.2 degrees Celsius, the hottest since record-keeping began in the 1890s. Portland's rose just as close, also breaking the record set a day earlier. Our final story on the show today is cold enough to cool you down on a hot day, if that's your thing. Think about dipping yourself in a chattering tub of ice, all in a bid to boost your body's immunity and connect with an inner strength. Marwan Abdelaziz tried this while on the orange dunes of the UAE desert, holding his breath calmly, as directed by executive coach of the ice bath and breathing session, Benoit Demoster. Cold water immersion and breathing techniques have been made popular by Wim Hof, Dutch cold water enthusiast who holds several world records for cold pressure.
More, your heartbeat will start going. The heartbeat is always a little bit behind. I'm going. Hold your breath. How are you? Well done.
Well, that's all we have for the program today. I'm Akaite Afia. Have a great evening and stay safe.